Conspirinormal.
So do you remember half of this shit?
Probably half.
Because as always, just, you know.
I'm just so impressed by the market improvement.
Yeah.
I really think this year was great.
Yeah.
It was just us, but.
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm going to. We'll do the slow decline of Rob. So go through at least everything from January to April.
So we're going to set an intention with our alleged better business candle.
Yes.
With the master key to success and the road to riches on it.
Yes. The sort of last show of 2019 and the first show of 2020. You can kind of call it that if you want to. What's the candle?
Better business.
Better business. Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense. All right. Ready to get started?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. Are we going to keep any of that witty banter in there?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Welcome to Conspirinormal, guys. It's
Welcome
Adam.
to 2020.
And this guy right here. Welcome to 2020, 2020. It's finally here. And
it is the cyberpunk dystopia we all long for.
Yeah, pretty much. We had a great year in 2019, and we want to go through and do this thing that we do every year called the year in review. Now, this is one of our probably like most self-serving shows, where we pretty much is just us and we just talk about the shows that we did throughout the year, kind of give a little synopsis, things that we might remember about them. And it's usually a little shorter show. And a little bit later, after we're done with that, we're going to talk about maybe some of our plans for the coming year of 2020, how things may be a little bit different. Now, I like to do this because one can go back essentially from, I think the first year we did this was 2015. So I've done a year in review show in 15, 16, 17, and 18. So really, one could go back and get like a complete almost synopsis.
The entire history of the show.
Of the entire history of the show from, I think, about episode 66 or 67, something like that.
Okay.
So that is very possible for you to do if you want to go back and listen to those shows. And of course, this is the first year in review that we've done actually over here at Serfiel's. Because as you'll soon see, we lost Rob this year. We don't know what happened to him. We think he might be in witness protection or something like that. So, and I'm sure I'll probably forget that I said that, and we'll probably mention him at some other points. But so let's get started. This is episode 295, I think, or 295 is this episode. So,
are you sure, man? I'm seeing that it's. Oh, you're talking about this one.
Yeah, this one that we're on. Yeah, 294 was the Dr. Future episode that we put out about a week ago. This one is now 295, and I'm going to have a special announcement at the end of this episode dealing with that.
Because we're getting really close to 300.
Yeah, we are getting really close to 300, and we've got an idea for episode 300, but I'm gonna get to that soon at the end of this. So we started with episode 243, first show of the year. Another thing I want to mention too, we're actually doing this. This one's a little odd because we're actually doing this at the beginning of the new year instead of the end of the old year. So that's a little different.
Just how it worked out with the holidays. Yeah.
Right. So episode 243, That's Greg Bishop and Adam Gorightly. That's A for Adamski.
Real cool book. I remember we were
right
reading this book when we went on that trip to Florida.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we went on a trip to Florida with my stepson and his friend, and we ended up in some kind of weird Mardi Gras, a 12th night celebration in Pensacola.
12th night stuff. We went to Gulf Breeze.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I almost forgot that we were there. House. Yeah. The UFO house in Pensacola Beach, yeah. So we were reading that book. I had it with me then, and so we then
it was hot off the press.
Hot off the press at that point, yeah. So we had Greg Bishop, Adam Gorightly, A for Adamski. Anything you remember about this show? I mean, basically, we talked about just the contactee movement and different people that were in the book.
Went through the characters that stood out to us, and it's always great to have those guys together, especially.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I don't know if anybody's heard out there, Greg Bishop, though, his wife passed away suddenly not too long ago. And so, like, our thoughts are with Greg. I can't imagine what he's going through.
Absolutely.
But maybe at a certain point, we'd love to get Greg back on, but I'm sure there's a lot going on in his life right now. Episode 244. That's Robert Bonomo, The 21 Faces of God. This one was actually recorded here because the previous one was recorded at Rob's. And that was the one about tarot.
Mm-hmm.
And basically the 21 decks of the cards of the major arcana.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That was his kind of like idea of the Fool's Journey.
Mm-hmm.
All the way from the Fool to, what's the last card? Is it the Hierophant or something like that?
I believe it's the World. I'm not sure.
Yeah, the World. Yeah, you're right. So that was his kind of like idea of like the Fool's Journey, the heroes, the hero legend, myths, mythology, stuff like that. That was a very, very interesting show. We also got to talk about a little bit about Andorra, which is the country wedged in between France and Spain that he lives in.
Yeah, that's right. That was real interesting.
Yeah, and we got a little bit off topic talking about fairy lore and UFOs and all kinds of weird stuff like that. Episode 245, our good friend Soraya called this one Doppelgangers, Vartigars, and Precognition. This one was also recorded at Rob's. Getting a pattern here. Always love having Soraya on the show. We talked a lot about just topics that he had been covering on Where Did the Road Go at the time. Just kind of a, loose conversation with him. Talked about doppelgangers, which, that's the copy of a weird copy of someone that is seen. Vartigar, that's some weird creature, I think. I can't exactly remember what that was. Because it's been almost a year, and some of just like precognitive stuff that he'd been talking about in the book Time Loops, I believe at that time. Serfiel's gonna die. It's not been. He's not had a good time here recently.
So you're saying that Vartigars? What the hell is a Vartigar?
Good question, because I don't remember what a Vartigar is.
So we talked about precognition.
Vardogers are... Okay, it's a spirit predecessor in Scandinavian folklore. I knew it had something to do with Scandinavia. It says it's a subtle difference from a doppelganger with a less sinister connotation. It's been linked to being a phantom double or form of bilocation. So that's what a Vartigar is. Episode 246, Tim Swartz, Jeff the Talking Mongoose. We recorded that over here. That was with Tim Swartz. We talked about Jeff the Talking Mongoose.
One of these poltergeist cases.
Yeah, one of these cases where a poltergeist manifested itself to a little girl as a talking mongoose. Probably one of the most interesting poltergeist cases that I've ever heard, and very well documented, actually. And we talked to Tim also about his theory that it was an AI or some kind of artificial intelligence left over from a previous civilization that it could explain talking poltergeists, which I thought was a very interesting concept. Not so sure if I buy it, but
and then it has
interesting.
some weird kind of Gnostic elements to it. I think we were talking about
Archon stuff. Yeah.
That's like this weird mechanical thing.
So the next episode was Heidi Hollis, and that was the Shadow People and Jesus encounters. But before we talk about that one, we actually did an episode that we recorded previously to that over here with Mark O'Connell. Remember? About J. Allen Hynek, and then like something like it crashed over there or something.
My computer crashed?
It wasn't the computer, it was the interface just blew up. Where we had that weird power surge and it stopped.
Damn.
And we lost the recording.
Damn.
Yeah. I tried to get him to reschedule, but he was probably just like, no, you know, bunch of amateurs. So I he never
Damn.
So I got Heidi Hollis on, I think about the week or so later. So we didn't actually miss a week. You guys never knew. And she talked about shadow people experiences, these experiences with the Hat Man that she has seen from an early age, encounters with Jesus that didn't look like the conventional Jesus and what that meant to her. That was an extremely interesting show. And on the same night, we actually recorded with Dave and Nico. Nico was someone I worked with at the time, and they were in a band called Future Unlimited here in Nashville, which I really don't know what they're doing. I haven't really, the last time I saw Nico, he said that they've not really have done anything lately.
They're a good band.
Yeah, they are a good band. So that was with them, and that was actually an in-studio thing, the first kind of in-studio guests that we had over here, and we just had a lot of fun with those guys. We talked about ancient alien stuff. We talked about some ghost and personal experiences that both of the guys had, and also somehow got on the subject of the band Cameo. I don't remember how exactly that came about. Episode 249, Chris Wolford came back.
You skipped how Dan came on 247 and talked about his Bigfoot stuff.
Oh, 247? Okay. Yeah, okay, so some of this, right, this is at a point when we were doing just like kind of those double shows.
Yeah.
Was that the first one we had Dan Maslak on?
I think so.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's right. He came on then. Kind of stopped doing that because there was like really long shows, and that's kind of where we started doing, because I wanted to have somebody else on. I started doing, instead of double guest shows, we did the bonus episodes.
Right.
But we'll get to those. So yeah, episode 249, Chris Wolford. We talked about his favorite subject, which is TTSA and Tom DeLonge. And we also talked a little bit about Bob Lazar on that episode as well.
There was some serious UFO beef going on.
Yeah, there was some serious UFO beef going on at the time, and that's very true. Then the next one we did at Rob's. This was episode 250, which I dubbed the 250th Mega Fortean Roundtable. This was Richard Haddam, Ren Collier, Joshua Cutchin, and Timothy Renner. We had all four of those guys on.
That was a good one.
Yeah, we had talked about near-death experiences, UFO contactees, talked, of course, with Tim about Flannel Man, kind of supernatural Bigfoot stuff. A lot of different subjects in that one, and that was a really, really good and impressive show. I think I listened to that one a couple of times. And, of course, Richard Haddam, always a pleasure to have him, since he wrote one of my favorite movies, and really a movie that anybody in this field should check out, called The Mothman Prophecies, which is, of course, based on the John Keel book. Episode 251. This was our Romper Room 5, back when we used to do those. This was called the Class Struggle Realignment, which we talked about. That was over here. We talked about Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, we talk about conservatism and family values and how it relates to economics.
And the class struggle.
And how some of the conservatives are now asking whether the libertarian or super free market economics are really promoting family values or not.
Yeah.
And how there's like possible, even with what happened with Trump, how there's possible realignments ideologically with social conservatism and different economic theories. That it's not like something that's going to be indefinitely tied together, though there's a lot of effort to do that.
Right.
There's a possibility that it won't be.
Right. Which was, I thought, and when you showed that to me, or I watched it, I thought that was a really interesting clip, for sure. Rebirth of Pan, we talked about that too, because you were reading that at the time.
Didn't we talk about, before that, didn't we talk about Slavoj Zizek too? Wasn't that the other side?
Yeah, we talked about that in relation to, we talked about Zizek in relation to what Tucker Carlson said.
Right, right.
And kind of comparing and contrasting
we
what
had this
they
like Marxist
talked about, right.
And then this like arch conservative basically saying the same things. And we're talking about how that was ironic.
Right, how weird that actually was that they were doing that. Yeah. We also talked about in that the Rebirth of Pan, which if anybody has watched Hellier Season 2, that has come up on that show. I kind of forgot we did that. Yeah. Yeah, we talked about that. We talked about this kind of like weird Gaia theory that he had, and we talked about how this weird other interesting theory about how these Lover's Lane monsters show up because a car or a mobile home is a giant orgone energy accumulator.
Mm-hmm.
And because people are having sex inside mobile homes and cars, that produces monsters somehow. I thought that was it's a very fascinating theory.
And
I have to give it that.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot of interesting stuff in that book, a lot of interesting ideas. But we tackled head on the most like problematic and racist stuff in it.
Yeah.
Because that has to be acknowledged. And with a lot of people have been revisiting this. It's kind of come up in the zeitgeist again. And I kind of feel like a lot of people, not to like pointing fingers, but I feel like a lot of people are kind of, when you have a book like that has such explosive things in it, I think you kind of got to front load all that. Just put it out there that, yeah, that's in here. Instead of like talking about ideas that come from authors like that and then letting people find out later, oh shit, it's got all this like super racist stuff, or whether author or not has really questionable links to things. So we front loaded all that.
Yeah.
And that's good to do, I think. Always being honest with stuff,
Because, well, let's talk a little bit. We could talk a little bit about that. I mean, this Jim Brandon goes by another name. So you have this researcher that writes like Weird America and Rebirth of Pan, and it says all this weird kind of Fortean, and especially paranormal things.
Well, and in Rebirth of Pan is like a lot of Rebirth of Pan is really disparaging to Native Americans. Like,
right,
because there's no way they could have created different structures and mounds and stuff. So it must be some kind of supernatural earth spirit that did it, because there's no way primitive people could do that. And so it's it's like really, it's not.
Yeah, it's bad. Yeah, it's bad. It's bad. I mean,
and he is really promoting a lot of like really well-known archaeological hoaxes in there too.
Right. Yeah, the stuff from the 19th century that is very white supremacist oriented, as pretty much everything was in that time.
Yeah.
And that is very much in the realm of pseudoscience, antiquarian age, instead of like any kind of real like serious archaeology, which really probably doesn't start till about 100 years later.
Which doesn't help. So then if you are using an interesting idea or observation from a book like that, but you're like not mentioning that stuff like that's in there, it's easy for someone to discredit you also. Because they're like, oh, you mean from the book that says, this or that hoax is real,
Yeah.
So
We also, in episode 253, I believe we did, maybe we did that over at Rob's. I don't remember anymore. This was Jenny, well, it probably was. Jenny and Tom, our good friends from 13 O'Clock Podcast. We spoke to them about goth music, serial killers, UFOs, and whatever other things that we talked to them about. It's always a full-ranging, did I skip one?
yeah, Zach.
Okay, yeah, Zach Hunt, episode 252. Yeah, this is the kind of a show that was a little precursor to our Strange Realities conference, because he talked about this book at Strange Realities, which was his book Unraptured, about how he used to believe in the concept of the rapture and now he doesn't, and how he feels that is just a vehicle for some real serious conservative politics and doesn't buy into it anymore. So that was a good show with him. I always enjoy having Zach on the show. All right, so I think that one was at Rob's, and then the next one was at Rob's. So we'll skip ahead. Episode 254.
Which that one with Jenny and Tom was really cool as usual. How many times we have them on this year?
It may have been, well, we've had Jenny on by herself, so it may have been like 3, I think, and we've done some Patreon stuff with them too.
Cool.
Episode 254. Now this one I felt was a really important show.
Might be the best of the year.
Yeah, I think so. The other one was a good. The next one is a good follow up as well. But American Cosmic with Diana Pazuka. This one, if you heard Coast to Coast, was actually where we were on. We got to be on Coast to Coast. More about that later. We actually played this, about a minute of this, where we just talked about it on that show, and I felt like this was a really important one. Now, American Cosmic, I highly recommend. It's a great book. It's essentially about her as a religious studies professor hanging out with these people that are seriously into UFOs.
Yeah, and seeing that it's basically religion.
Yeah, essentially a religion. At the time, we were kind of thinking that it was a way to promote transhumanism. But since then, have kind of come to the conclusion that they may actually be setting up some kind of religion, or based on some kind of like interdimensional UFO religion to counter the concept of transhumanism. So we were under that impression. A few things I got clued into later on that kind of keyed me into the possibility that it might be the opposite. That it's actually, so that probably is one of my favorite interviews that we've ever done with Pazuka. You want to add anything to that?
No, just go listen to it. It's one of my favorites we've done.
Yeah, absolutely.
With a pretty high level academic.
Yeah, that was over here. Episode 255, Red Pill Junkie 2. Now, this was pretty much a response to the American Cosmic interview. Because we did basically 2 shows about this book.
It was the biggest thing in the whole community at the time.
Yeah,
everyone read it, and it was causing a lot of waves, mostly positive.
So when we talked about kind of like, we continue with the transhumanism vein and kind of like the connections of transhumanism in Silicon Valley and also to Jacques Vallée. Like I said, we were under this impression that this was what this was all about. And how Vallée influenced some of the people that Pazuka writes about in her book. And we also talked about the Red Pill's kind of concerns and issues about To the Stars Academy.
Yep.
We talked about that. I mean, this was also, I think, just as important as the one that we did. So I'm very, very proud of those 2 episodes. Episode 256, Jason Offutt, Chasing American Monsters. This was recorded at Rob's, I believe. This was in April. First time we had Jason on. I'd love to have him on again. We talked about his book where he goes state by state, and he actually lists these monsters, cryptids that are seen in these various states. And I actually did where we actually picked up our own like birth states. So we did like Tennessee for me, Michigan for Rob. For you, we did Arizona. And we also talked about some stuff out of California where there's this really weird story about a woman encountering a giant cockroach that was dressed in like a trench coat or something and tried to get in her hotel room. Something like that, which is probably one of the most bizarre stories I've ever heard. And then we got even more bizarre in episode 257. Aginost, Aliens and Agenda 21. I love this guy.
Yeah,
I do.
Yeah,
I love him. He is something else. So we kind of got on this weird like Agenda 21 rabbit hole with him and another guest, in which I had no meaning to do this, but it just kind of happened. And like Agenda 21, the whole UN, I believe something about the environment, it's got something to do with that, but that like this is it's actually for like terraforming the planet for aliens to live in. Yeah. Was what Augie was saying.
It's kind of a lot of throwback stuff. It's a lot of that 80s and 90s,
right?
New World Order, black nobility, Illuminati bloodlines, and all that. It was kind of a big gumbo. He was just throwing it all in there.
All that kind of weirdness,
which when a lot of people might be, pretty easily led into that kind of stuff. But me and you've kind of been around the block a few times.
Yeah,
shit.
Just slightly.
Like, it's greatest hits,
Yeah, right. I mean, that's pretty much it. But you know what's so funny is that I will get more response out of those shows, especially with Augie. I will get more response from people.
They're the greatest hits, man. If you go see whatever band, they're if they don't play, if Journey don't play, Don't Stop Believing, it's a problem.
Good point. You don't
hit, Illuminati bloodlines, black nobility, reptilians, and it's,
Yeah, we'll need to do a little more Illuminati and black nobility. We need to find a black nobility guest for 2020. What is that? Venetian black nobility?
There's a lot of actual good research going on about the actual Illuminati, and Adam Weishamp's papers are being published now and translated, and so there's a lot of good scholarly work about the actual Illuminati. I think we should follow some of that stuff.
Okay, but doesn't Joseph Farrell, doesn't he talk about the black nobility stuff and like Venetians?
I think he might get into some of that stuff. I'm not sure. I've only delved into his Nazi UFO stuff.
Okay, the bell. Episode 258, Jack Brewer. This is the second time we had him on. We called this the UFO Trail, which is the name of Jack's blog. We talked about some of the latest events in ufology and some of the doubts Jack had about the latest TTSA and ATIP revelations, especially things with the so-called metamaterials that were being touted around at that time, which you don't really hear about, and explored the similarities between the QAnon conspiracy community and the UFO community, and talked about American Cosmic. Yeah, because Jack actually was one of these people that was really suspicious about not necessarily Pasuka herself, but some of her sources and what they were telling her. And we explored into American Cosmic. So essentially, we almost did like 3 episodes about that.
We got really deep on it. All revolves pretty much around disinformation. I think is really what all that revolves around, and he. He's really good at delving into that. Yeah.
The guy really does his research. Episode 259, Walter Bosley's 7th episode we've done with Bosley. That's the Esoteric Napoleon, where we talked about his research into Napoleon and the military expedition to Egypt and some of the hidden motivations behind why he went to Egypt, some of the really esoteric things that Napoleon may have been into. And this is always something with Bosley, a possibility of Napoleon looking for an ancient lost civilization.
Right.
And also how the Prussians and I guess the Teutonic Knights were arrayed against Napoleon and what he was trying to do.
And how the ripples of that expedition affected Western civilization and occultism.
Correct. We then followed that up with a bonus episode where we started doing that this year. So actually, there's a lot more episodes than what we're
this
talking
is like
about.
The UFO beef, because
This is the UFO beef.
this was Chris's response. Chris Wolford's response to Jack Brewer.
Yeah, to Jack Brewer, which was for episode 258. And we just talked about some of the points, and he defended ATIP and TTSA. That was not a very long episode. That was only about 51 minutes. Episode 260. This one recorded over at Rob's. Dinah Ray, Crowns and Cabals. We talked about
Kind of some more greatest hits.
more greatest hits. Yes, her views on the New World Order type conspiracy theories,
Depopulation.
and why she wrote the book Crowns and Cabals, an apocalyptic tale of the New World Order. And then we got into Agenda 21 and
Again.
what that's got to do with population control. I don't think we brought aliens into it this time, though. I think this was demons.
Blue helmet still.
Blue helmets. Yeah. Blue helmets. Yes. Episode 261. Tim Banal. First time we had Tim on the show. Stanton Freeman, podcasting in weird 14 stories. Now, Tim is our good friend from Boston, the host of the very famous Banal of America.
All of America.
Which I got to meet Tim in when I went to Paramania this last year, which was hosted by Joshua Cutchin in Atlanta. And got to know the guy. And he agreed to come on the show. And what happened was that the day we actually did the show, Stanton Freeman had passed away, I think that day or the day before. So we talked a lot about Stanton Freeman and a lot about Tim's memories of Freeman, because he knew Freeman was really good friends with him, and talked about kind of like the future of podcasting, where it's going, where all this Patreon stuff is going. And also talked about some of the weird stories, because Tim is the news editor for Coast to Coast AM. Episode 262, David Metcalf. We talked about Santa Muerta. Now, David, I also got to had the pleasure of meeting in Atlanta, Paramania, and we talked about the Santa Muerta cult, Saint Death, the folk saint venerated in Latin America, especially in Mexico, and how it's a growing new religious movement, and talked about some of the why criminality is associated with it. Mm-hmm. David is a real expert on this stuff. He really knows a lot about this topic. And I'm gonna definitely this year get Metcalf back on.
Yeah, his blog is really cool. He's in all kinds of stuff.
Yes, he is. He really is.
Really interesting guy.
So this was the point where I'm going to stop saying we recorded this at Rob's or we recorded this here, because this was the last show we ever did at Rob's.
Dang, really?
David Metcalf.
David Metcalf?
That was it. Wow.
After
that, it just kind of just petered out, and we started doing them more over here. And then now, since then, we've done every show over here now. Serfiel took over the reins, so to speak. So this was followed up by another Romper Room. This is Romper Room 7, and the reason why this was 7 is because Romper Room 6 is on Patreon. Go check it out. Sources of New Thought, where we talked about the book written by Adam Parfrey called The Secret Source.
Yeah, The Secret Source.
And we discussed the origins and the concepts involved with the New Thought movement. We looked at how that's really inspired, like the self-help movement, self-empowerment, inspired the salesman of the 1950s, Norman Vincent Peale.
Yeah,
I talked about, and we mentioned this in the last episode, how it really inspires Donald Trump,
and its ultimate claims to Hermetic,
right,
or Western esoteric roots,
which are kind of filtered through ideas of like mesmerism, work of Phineas Quimby.
Yeah, and Mitch Horowitz's Occult America book really informed me and helped me a lot in that episode.
Yeah. Which, by the way, we're going to try to get Mitch Horowitz on the show this year.
We'll put out the intention for you, Mitch.
Yeah, we're doing it. That's why we're burning a candle. And Dr. Future joined us on that episode and talked a little bit about New Thought with us as well, because he'd been studying some of it in preparation for the books that he is writing and is about to put out.
I forgot we did that. Did we just call him?
Yeah, we called him. Yeah. Episode 264. This is Aaron Golias. We talked about some subjects from his Saucer Life podcast. We had him on at least a couple times before. And he's been with us, too, for a lot of the roundtables, too. We talked about Frank Strangus and Valiant Thor, and about the television broadcast on Alternative 3.
Yeah.
And how that kind of conspiracy has kind of persisted throughout the years.
To this day.
In 1973, the year of the humanoids, when there was nothing but weird humanoid-looking creatures abounding in UFO mythology. Bonus episode number 2. Jay Dyer was here in Nashville, and we got to talk to him, which you helped set that up.
Yeah, I went and met him at downtown.
Yeah.
And we went on a little tour with him and talked about esoteric Hollywood.
And we did a little episode with him, sort of kind of live, that we later posted up, and it was only about 40 minutes. So that's why it was just a bonus episode. Yeah, on the streets of Nashville. 265. This is Randall Carlson. This third time we have had Randall on. Actually, really the fourth time, because we had him on for episode 200 back in 2018. This is Cosmic Catastrophes, Climate Change, and the Holy Grail. And we talked about a trip that he took to Mesa Verde and Chimney Rock. I think this was part of the Contact at the Cabin that the Grimerica guys did and the Snake Brothers were at. And how we talked about how those landscapes were formed and what his ideas about it. Talked about climate change. Talked about the link between the Holy Grail and climate change in the Dark Ages and what all that meant. And we basically just kind of sat at the foot of the master. That's kind of how that went. I've got some ideas that I want to try to get Randall back. We're going to definitely get Randall back on the show soon. Number 3 bonus episode, we talked to I believe he's a Patreon, Jules. We talked about his personal experiences. This was almost enough for really to be as long as an episode. Talked about the nature of the soul, its relationship to the body, and talked about his weird ghost experiences that he had. That was an interesting episode, I will say. I do like to talk about people's personal experiences.
Yeah, that one was almost like The Shining at some hotel or something.
Yeah. There's some weird stuff in that. Episode 266, Julie Ryan, Angelic Attendants. She is a psychic and medical intuitive, and she works primarily with the dying. And we talked about her book, Angelic Attendants. What really happens is we transition from this life into the next. And what she sees, she talked about what she sees as people transition over and some of the interesting rituals that she observes. And we kind of clued her into some interesting, I think, kind of occult kind of things when we spoke to her. 267, Justin Cancelleri, Beyond Reason. This was a show that we did with Justin. He is a fellow podcaster. He does an excellent podcast called Beyond Reason, and he used to do one called Paratruth Radio. And we get into some of his experiences as a paranormal investigator, including investigating the childhood home of Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yeah, that was pretty.
And there was also a story that he told about a child that was being tormented by a spirit that took on the guise of a cartoon character that the child liked. And yeah, that to me that had some alien abduction and alien contact themes to it as well. We followed that up. But now we have this whole. Oops.
And you're playing it.
Bonus episode number 4, the Dennis Lloyd Martin disappearance. We were joined by Dan Maslach and Steve Stockton, where we talked about Dennis Lloyd Martin, who vanished in June 1969 in the Smoky Mountains National Park, not too far from here. And we look at the details of the case, and we look into some of the another case as well. Trini Gibson, a girl that disappeared there, and also in like 1976. And Steve has some real kind of personal knowledge of this because he lives in Portland now, but Steve is a native Tennessean, and he also grew up in the Oak Ridge area close to Knoxville, so he knows a lot about this growing up there. And Dan, we actually had him on a couple episodes later, but we recorded it that night with him because we talked about some of his Bigfoot, and we'll get to that in just a second.
Yeah.
268, P.D. Newman, Alchemically Stoned.
The psychedelic, what is it? The Psychedelic Secret of Freemasonry.
Right.
Is his book where he argues that, so I guess in some Freemasonic rituals, there's what he thinks is ample evidence for the use of different psychedelic drugs.
Yeah, we talked about the acacia leaf, ergot, and the fly agaric mushrooms are some of the plants that he talks about in like symbolic language in Freemasonic circles. Mm-hmm. This was probably, I think, one of our really better episodes.
Yeah, it was really
I was pretty impressed by P.D. Newman. I'd love to have him back on. He is a rather busy guy.
Yeah, he's from Memphis.
From Memphis, yeah. So he's also a fellow Tennessean as well. So we talked to using like psychedelics, rituals, initiations, and how like the ancient mystery schools influenced modern day Freemasonry as well. Episode 269, that's Dan Maslak. We get on this weird Bigfoot kick here in about these episodes. We talked about Bigfoot conspiracies and weirdness. This was talking to Dan about some of his thoughts on like different conspiracies that he'd heard in the Bigfoot realm. Some of these like weird characters, very Men in Black like, that show up in one in camouflage and one dressed in a suit, that show up in when people have weird Bigfoot encounters. Timothy Renner has also encountered this as well. Episode 270, we continue with Bigfoot. This was In the Shadow of Big Red Eye. This was with Mike Familant, who actually reached out to me to come on the show. He's a Bigfoot researcher with the Sussex County Bigfoot. I believe that's in New Jersey. And he has made these videos where he goes out and investigates Bigfoot. He's one of these guys that believes Bigfoot is an ape in the woods. And we kind of got onto the subject of the possibility of a paranormal Bigfoot. So that was... an interesting show to talk to him about. Talked all about his personal experiences, and we kind of got onto this thing about how these guys are going out there and calling Bigfoot and essentially doing rituals.
Yeah, invocations.
In the woods, invocations. And of course, then stuff starts to happen to them. So that's something to think about. And we actually talked a little bit about that with Tim Renner on some other episodes. 271, Alex Simchuk, The Slave Circle. This was a little bit out of the ordinary. Kind of got away from the paranormal theme on this one and more into the conspiracy realm. And we talked to Alex about his documentary, The Slave Circle, which is about being involved with multi-level marketing. And we talked to Alex about the various techniques the companies use to recruit and basically brainwash their employees. And the psychological techniques that are used to sell to the public. And we also talked about how there's a similarity to these tactics that multi-level marketing does, and also to cults.
Yeah.
Do you think
same
kind of point out about that one?
Same kind of mind control techniques. Just the textbook, all the textbook tricks of, public humiliation and just all of them. And we recently, have delved into some guests talking about cults, which we'll talk about later. And, we see the same exact things.
Same exact tactics, even multi-level marketing tactics.
Yeah, yeah.
we followed this up with episode 272 with Grimerica.
Which that was a pretty big one.
That was a big one. Now, this was right when we were making the website for Strange Realities.
Okay. So this is when we were
live.
Is this when we announced Strange Realities?
Yeah, this is the first announcement we actually did on Strange Realities, where we talked about it on that show. That was a swap cast with them, with Darren and Graham from Grimerica. And we just kind of talked about the future podcasting, internet censorship, talked about New Thought, which apparently Darren is very into. And those really great guys. I'd love to do that again.
Yeah, most definitely.
And that's and that really, from them, we really got at least 2 or 3 people that came out to the Strange Realities conference. Followed that up with episode 273, Ren Collier. This is the third time we had Ren on by himself. We talked about the Ordo Templi Orientis, Thelema system, and about Aleister Crowley. And we just talked about the history of it. And we also talked to Ren about where it came from, what the beliefs and the rituals that are associated with it, and kind of like talked about the wider occult system of Thelema and Crowley, obviously Kenneth Grant. Probably one of my favorite shows that we've done on the on that kind of like a cult kind of subject.
I think some sex magic too.
I think we did get into some sex magic, which we'll get back to here in a second. How we got another guest on to talk about sex magic. Episode 274. This was your idea. Woke in the 90s Roundtable.
Part 1.
Part 1. Yes. This was Adam Gorightly, Aaron Gullius, Red Pill Junkie. And we talked about the conspiracy culture of the 90s and how the zine scene, the emergence of the internet. We talked about UFO conspiracy, weird UFO conspiracies, satanic panic, the Y2K, and the new, and of course, the New World Order. And on a side note on this, we lost power right in the middle of recording it.
Yeah, it was a storm.
And fortunately, Adam Gorightly recorded it. So he recorded probably like most of the show. And we actually used his recording, I think. And he actually started taking over as host of the show. So if you hear that, when we're just gone, he just kept it rolling, which was like a really great honor, honestly, that Adam Gorightly took over as a guest host.
He's a great podcaster
for
too.
A little while. Right. Yeah, exactly.
Dimensions.
He was one of my first podcasts that I listened to back in the day.
Me too.
Yeah. So, that was an awesome thing for me. I just wish it hadn't happened like it did. But we saved it. 273, Timothy Renner joined us, and this was our swap cast with him when Strange Familiars. Now, we started doing these swap casts as a means to promote Strange Realities. This is why we did it, and but we love doing swap casts. So we talked to him about his experiences with alien abduction, or what he thinks was alien abduction, but he never really left his room. And more encounters with Flannel Man and with Bunny Man. And we also talked a little bit more about what we talked about with Dan Maslach, about the weird men in flannel encounters after Bigfoot, and men in camo and guys in suit. So we talked a little bit more, got a little more clarification on that as well. Moving right along, episode 276. This is Woke in the 90s Part 2 with Tim Banal, Greg Bishop, and Robert Guffey. Now, how this came about is I wanted Bishop to be part of the first 90s roundtable, but he couldn't do it that night, and everybody else could. So I said, well, why don't we just do another roundtable? And so we got these guys, and we talked about more about the 90s zine scene, which, of course, Bishop was really involved in, the UFO hoaxes, and some Elvis is alive conspiracies. And we talked about some of our experiences going to the Alien Expo in Knoxville, which we did in August. around my birthday, actually on my birthday, and we we saw some speakers there, and we got to talk about it. We got to talk about it on the show, and we passed out flyers for Strange Realities Conference, which, you know, proud to say, at least we got one person that came to Strange Realities Conference from that conference, but that's the only person that ever came because of flyers. Which, you know, oddly enough, trying to figure out whether that will be effective for Strange Realities 2020 or not. Bonus episode number 5. We have Pamela Furr. We talked about the future of podcasting and talk radio. You know, Pamela is a local radio show host here in Nashville. She was gracious to come on and talked about some of like going to CryptidCon a couple of years ago, and talked a little bit about Bigfoot, and talked about kind of like what, you know, talk radio and podcasting and what the future is with that. 277, Dr. Heather Lynn, Evil Archaeology. And we talked to her about her book, Evil Archaeology, Demons, Possessions, and Sinister Relics, and how she got into some of like more unconventional and bizarre aspects of archaeology.
And she was an actual archaeologist.
Yes, I mean this was one of the best episodes of this year. I really
it was really good. Yeah, I'd go back and check it out.
Yeah, I talked about some of like curses and some of the weird experiences she had, and a series of misfortunes that she had while she was writing the book. Some of the material she was getting into. We talked about Pazuzu, which is always an interesting thing to me, and the toilet demon.
And then she got more on the conspiratorial stuff, though, as far as this international black market of antiquities theft,
right?
And how it might be reaching into all kinds of tentacles of power and potentially really weird, scary Indiana Jones type of stuff.
Yeah, and that's a Patreon episode. So you guys can find that on patreon.com/Conspirinormal. $1 gets you in.
Not the whole episode, but there is a Patreon episode of
right.
Heather Lynn talking about that stuff.
278, we start getting into the weeds with the Strange Realities Conference, talking to some of our guests that are going to be there. This was Joshua Cutchin, Tim Banal, and Timothy Renner, where we did 3 segments each with them as individuals. And we just talked about what they would be presenting at the conference, which Josh talked about talked about fairy lore and alien abduction, and Tim talked about the Pennsylvania Bigfoot, and Banal talked about the history of the flat earth theory, and then Timothy Renner and Joshua Cutchin both spoke about their forthcoming book, which should be out this year, called Where the Footprints End. And be sure we will have them about that. 279, Mr. Soraya from Where Did the Road Go rejoins us. This was the Where Did the Road Go swapcast. So another swapcast, just left and right around this time. I wonder why. We talked about sex magic. We talked about the occult. Talked about paranormal entertainment. Talked about some of his other experiences with the occult and his kind of personal journey with it. And you brought up about how some of the anti-occult material, like James Shelby Downard and become more like Christian stuff, actually serves as a gateway to lead people into a further study of occult and hermeticism.
Absolutely.
Yep. And talked a little bit about New Thought with Soraya too. Number 280, Jenny Ashford. This was the 5th time we've had Jenny on by herself. This was about her book, The Faceless Villain 3. We talked about the unsolved murder cases from the 1980s and the 1990s. And we're talking about the redhead murderer, Amy Mihaljevic, Tristan Brubach, which was an incredibly gruesome, weird ritual kind of case. And the Inukashara Park dismemberment incident, which is one of my favorite. That should be a band name.
It sounds like a death metal band.
Yeah. That one from Japan for sure. 281, Stephanie Quick. We talked about sex magic. Sex magic 101 is what I called that. And we had to kind of give this a little bit of an R rating.
Yep. If not XXX.
Now, how this came about was Stephanie took some umbrage with our episode with Ren Collier that Ren didn't know anything about sex magic because Ren talked about like primarily sex magic as masturbation.
The chaos magic solo deal.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. You know, jerking off on sigils and all that. So we talked to her about how that form of magic is just another form of energy transfer, and how really the negative and the positive aspects of it. We talk about sex with disincarnate entities and what that may mean, and the influence of figures on sex magic as B.B. Randolph, which we later covered Alice Bunker Stockham, and of course Aleister Crowley.
I think a lot of Dion Fortune too. We talked about.
Did we talk about Dion Fortune?
A little bit.
Some of it. Mm-hmm. Okay. Episode 282, Brothers of the Serpent. This is another swapcast we did with Russ and Kyle from the excellent Brothers of the Serpent podcast. They're also known as the Snake Brothers. We talk about some of the materials they talked about on the show. We talk about the ancient mysteries, Atlantis, Ark of the Covenant, and we also got to talk about the Dybbuk box, which is one of my favorite subjects, and something about what Freemasons know. 283, this is Strange Realities Conference Preview Part 2, where we had Zach Hunt, Joe Damari, Mark Anthony Wyatt, Guy Malone. This was another preview of Strange Realities and what we were going to be talking about there. Zach, of course, was talking about Unraptured. Mark was talking about his Cornwall history. Joe was giving his demonstration of his Ghost Pro VR at the conference, and what Guy was going to be talking about Roswell. And we kind of turned the interview we did with Guy and his friend Steven into a bonus episode, which we followed up next. This was in early October, so just a few weeks before the conference. This was their experiences at Storm Area 51.
Right.
So we talked to them about that. 284, Nick Redfern. This is the 7th time we've had Nick on the show. Flying Saucers from the Kremlin. Yeah, we talked about his book, Flying Saucers from the Kremlin, UFOs, Russian meddling, Soviet spies, and Cold War secrets. And we talked about some of the links between the famous UFO stories, Soviet disinformation during the Cold War, and we also talked about psychological warfare and what that meant, and how some of the contactees may have been Soviet spies or working for us. We don't know.
And that was cool because it had that, it has that real historical look at the way disinformation in the UFO phenomenon happens, and it can help to inform people or at least make people skeptical, because it has such a sordid history of the fact that this may be going on now. Yep. Still, of course.
285, Brent Rains. We talked about his book, John Keel, The Man, the Myths, and the Ongoing Mysteries. This was a kind of a loose biography about John Keel and about some of his own personal experiences and his correspondence with John Keel over the years. Brent lives here in Tennessee, and he did not speak but he was at the Strange Realities Conference. And this coming Strange Realities Conference in 2020, we hope to have him speaking. So stay tuned for that.
It looks like from the picture, this came out after.
It came out after. Yeah, that was a picture that Brent took.
The conference.
Yeah, that's your banner that
Mike's
you had spray painted. Yeah, it's which is still in here somewhere, I believe. Mm-hmm. Episode 286. This is actually, the show was recorded before, but we put it out after. So around this time we had the Strange Realities Conference on October 19th. But after that we had on Alan Stievelman for episode 286, Witness to Another World, where we talked about his documentary, Witness of Another World, and about the experiences of a young Argentine child named Juan Perez in 1978. And about the involvement of Jacques Vallée with this case and working with Jacques Vallée on the documentary, and some about how this ties into like a shamanic journey as well. Excellent documentary. Bonus episode number 7 was the Strange Realities Conference roundup and Q&A session where we talked about what our experiences at Strange Realities Conference, and we also played the Q&A session from the conference as well. 287. This is Jake Richards, called his book Backwards Witchcraft, Conjure and Folk Magic from Appalachia. And we talked, he's also a native Tennessean as well. And we talked to Jake about that folk magic tradition and some of the practices he's learned and the kind of how the cultural geographic traditions of Appalachia have influenced his folk magic. And also talked about some tales of the Cherokee little people as well. Stay tuned because next episode we will be talking about some more folk magic.
That was really
which
cool.
I'm really becoming rather interested in. Number 288, we're closing the gap here. This is UFO Roundtable, Contactees and Goblins. Aaron Gullius, Richard Haddam, and John E.L. Tinney. And we talked to all three of these guys about Orfeo Angelucci, some of his experiences, some of the possibility of Orfeo Angelucci being part of a mind control program, the aspects of fairy lore and alien abductions, what that may mean, and the Kelly Hopkinsville Goblin Encounters, which I had not watched Hellier yet,
Right.
but figures very much prominently in that. Which some of that was based off of Aaron Gullius's Saucer Life.
That was real fun. We had a really good time with those
Very
big,
fun,
big
very
round
fun.
tables. Everyone had a blast.
289, Marie D. Jones. This is the second time I've had Marie on. The first time I had her on was in 2015. We talked about her book, Celebrity Ghosts and Notorious Hauntings. And we talked about what's kind of the nature of what we're dealing with. Are we really talking to spirits of the dead? Are they recordings of the environment? Is it something we're creating subconsciously? And we talked about the 11:11 phenomenon and the relationship to synchronicity and what that all means as well. 290. This is Alan Greenfield, Secret Cipher of the Euphonauts.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Which we actually talked about that, but we also talked about P.B. Randolph as well, because Alan has done a lot of research on Randolph. And we talked about basically the Secret Cipher of the Euphonauts, which again, at the time, I had not watched Hellier, any of it, and had no idea, not much of an idea, the Secret Cipher of the Euphonauts had anything to do with that. And we recorded that on the 19th. I dropped that show on December 1st, just a few days after Hellier Part 2 premiered, which was another odd synchronicity. 291, which a lot of these you guys have just heard. This was Jenny and Tom again from the 13 O'Clock podcast. We talked about Tom's life in Brazil, all weird Tom's idea about 5G and technology, how it's going to change the world, and Judy Smith disappearance, and whether Jesus and Elvis are the same deity here in the South. Got Tom's theories upon that as well. 292, Greg Newkirk. This was talking about Hellier Season 2, which this was an outgrowth of me posting that TL and Greenfield show when Aaron Gullius dropped this on the Saucer Life Twitter feed, and that got Newkirk's attention, and I said, let's do a show, and I got him on. I highly recommend Hellier. It's probably to me, it's one of the best documentaries that really illustrates a lot of this weird 14 phenomenon that we talk about a lot on this show. 293, this was Naomi Van Winkle. She is here in Nashville. We talked about her podcast Cult in Connecticut, and about how she grew up in a cult in Norwich, Connecticut. She left it, and how her journey out has been. And we also looked back at Alex Simchuk episode where we talked about multi-level marketing and how essentially the cult that she was a part of, although much later after she got out, started putting in like multi-level marketing techniques as well. Which brings us to the previous episode 294. It's 8th time we've had, well, it's more than that with Dr. Future. He's been on several times, but we talked about his book, Two Masters and Two Gospels, Part 1, which, guys, that will hopefully be out very, very soon. I hope you guys will look into and get that book. We will definitely have Mike back on for sure. I think I could do about like probably 6 or 7 interviews off that one book. There's so much information. So that brings us up to date. That was 2019. Any reflections on 2019?
I mean, this was just it's the first year of me being a permanent fixture. So
you were a permanent fixture in 2018.
Well, I mean, for the entire year. So
Gotcha.
It was pretty fun ride, man. I'm really seeing I think even though it's just me and you, I think the quality's been really great. I think it's been really interesting, really diverse. I know you've received some criticism for kind of, I think, my influence of like a lot of occultism, getting into it.
Yeah, very little.
But we're really exploring a lot of different topics, and it's a blast.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, it's I want to, well, let's take a break here, and we will come back at your little interlude, and we'll talk about kind of the future of the show. So we'll stop right here. Back to talk about the future. Talk about what 2020 has in store, which, there's some things that we want to do differently. And we've been talking about this for a while. We want to do the Patreon differently and try to do more things to get you guys more to contribute to Patreon. And we've got some ideas. One of the ideas that we have, the main idea really, is to do more episodes, because we've been bad in the past about putting up our Patreon episodes. A lot of it has been because we'll have guests on, or they may not have time to do a Patreon episode. Sometimes with like people like Tom and Jenny, we're able to get them to do another hour with us or do another 30 minutes. But we can't do that with everybody.
Yeah.
It's just the time restrictions that our guests have, and other guests that we know, like Timothy Renner, or Josh, or Soraya. We can generally get that done, but some others we can't. So I wouldn't expect like guests Patreon episodes.
Yeah, a lot of this is going to be more of us just having dialogue and us doing research on particular subjects. We're thinking about having series.
Yeah. And these will probably be about maybe 20 to 30 minutes long, if that. They're not going to be very long, maybe like really just blurbs. But what I'd like to do is something that's on maybe at least a bi-weekly basis, where you guys are going to get your Patreon money's worth from us. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. And we would like to know from our Patreons, or from someone that is thinking about becoming a Patreon, what you would like to see in a Patreon fee from Conspirinormal. Because we've got all these different ideas. We're trying to figure out how to restructure this. I'm going to be setting a whole other goal, because right now our goal is $200 a month, which we kind of like skirt a little bit, behind or past. So I'm going to be setting a goal of probably an ambitious goal of about $1,000 a month. And really, guys, $1 at the moment gets you in. And I'm not really wanting to restructure that because I think that if 1,000 people gave us $1, we could have $1,000, but it doesn't really always work that way.
Yeah.
And we do appreciate the people that have, donated, are supporting us at $5, $10, $20, all those. We really appreciate all that. But it may be something that we have to up to like $3, just to get people in, $3 a month. So we're looking into that. We're looking in. We're gonna totally restructure the Patreon. What the prize levels are going to be. I don't know exactly where I'm going to top it out at yet, but there's at least going to be one level that you guys are going to get a T-shirt, which we got the T-shirts that we get from TeePublic, which are the skull and the fez, and then the Bigfoot and the fez, and then I've also got Strange Realities T-shirts as well. Mm-hmm. And so you guys will get like pretty much 2 T-shirts from us if you sign up at a certain level. What are we thinking? The $20 level? I think that's what we're thinking. That, yeah. And as we kind of go forward in time here, we'll have a much better idea of what we're going to do for Patreon.
Well, we really do need the feedback.
Right. Yeah, we need the feedback. We need to know, because
we got a unique show and a unique audience, and so everything that works for other people may not work for us, and we're just trying to figure it out. We need to get your help.
Right. And you guys, contact us at conspirinormal@gmail.com. That's the main place you can go. You can also go to the Conspirinormal Facebook page. You can contact us on there, send us a message. You can if you're already a Patreon, you can send us a message on our Patreon. And also, I have my personal Facebook page, Adam Sane. You guys can contact us on Facebook with any kind of insights or suggestions stuff that you may want to see, if it would help bring us a little more Patreons, because you guys, we put this show on for free. It's this thing is a labor of love. We would like to see a little bit coming towards us too. Also for the future, Strange Realities 2020 is going to happen as well. And we're going to have more announcements about that. We're looking at sometime in September. All right. So this is episode 295. And we are rapidly approaching episode 300. Now, in the past, we have done these live roundtables. For like episode 50, way back in the day, I did a roundtable. Episode 100, I did a roundtable that had like Micah Hanks came and joined us. Dr. Future was there. And then episode 200 was Randall Carlson was in the studio with us, and Joshua Cutchin and Dr. Future, and a whole interesting cast of characters. So we've done those type of shows. And since Strange Realities took up a lot of our time, and we pulled in so many people out of town for that kind of put a nix on that happening for episode 300.
Yeah.
So I've had an idea what I want to do for that episode is listeners coming on and talking about the show, or talking about their personal experiences, or talking about things that they're researching, or if they have any questions for us that they would like answered. We'd like you guys to come on and be on the show. So please contact us if you are interested in being on. Conspirinormal@gmail.com, Conspirinormal Facebook page, my Facebook page, Adam Sane, Twitter at Conspirinormal. You can contact me there too. Instagram, you can contact us. So there's all these ways to contact us. So we'd really like to get that set up as soon as possible, because we want to focus on the listeners this time for episode 300. We think that that's a really special episode to do so. So I think that about covers it. And I will definitely make more of an announcement about that each episode as we go forward.
Yeah.
So, Serfiel, I'll tell everybody where they can find us on Patreon.
You can find us at patreon.com/Conspirinormal, or make a one-time donation on Conspirinormal.com.
He's really sick, guys. He's losing his voice, which was bad for a non-guest episode. So I'm sorry about that, man. All right, guys. So it's going to be a great year. We're really looking forward to it. We've got some great guests lined up already. And stay tuned for what's going to happen in 2020 on Conspirinormal.
If you would like to help the show, please consider becoming a Patreon at www.patreon.com/Conspirinormal or leave a one-time donation at Conspirinormal.com. And please check out our YouTube channel, Conspirinormal Podcast.